right, good morning to some, good afternoon to all. I'm Eliot Weiner, professor at Iowa State University and a former conference chair of ITSEC. And I'm here today representing the National Training and Simulation Association, NTSA, that we all know and love. Quick little note for those online who may be new to NTSA, we are a nonprofit association dedicated to facilitating dialogue between government, industry, and academia on topics related to providing the best possible modeling, simulation, and training systems for our warfighters, first responders, and critical infrastructure professionals. Today, we're excited to host a webinar on extended reality for government and military, securing the future with immersive technology. I really want to say a special thank you to HTC, the sponsor of today's webinar. And now we're going to take just a few seconds to let our panelists introduce themselves. So we will start with Dan O'Brien, President of the Americas, HTC VIVE. Dan? Oh, I don't think we hear you, Dan. Got a little audio.
There we go. Better?
Perfect.
Yes, great. Sorry about that. No, thanks for having me, and thanks for giving us the opportunity to present to you guys today. My name is Dan O'Brien. I've been with HTC for 17 years, and I've been in the consumer electronics industry for over 25. I've worked on everything from the first Android phone to the first 4G LTE phones, and actually bringing and starting the VIVE business at HTC. So I have a long history of doing this, and I've been doing VR and XR since 2014, and really excited about the opportunity to speak to you about where the industry is going and how I can contribute to your knowledge base. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Our next panelist is Dave Dwyer, the Chief Operating Officer for Mass Virtual. Dave?
Thanks, HTC, for sponsoring and inviting us to be part of it. I am Dave Dwyer, the Chief Operations Officer for Mass Virtual. Been working in defense sector for about 21 years and been sitting in my current role here. And I'll turn it back to you, Eliot.
All right, thank you. And then our third panelist is Doug Patton, SIMS Innovation Cell Chief for the U.S. Air Force. Doug?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Just wanted to thank HTC for sponsoring this. And I'm Doug Patton. I'm the SIMS Innovation Cell Chief. So all training devices, simulation devices, all that stuff kind of comes under our office. And this is going to be an exciting conversation we're going to have today.
All right, thank you. So let me take a second and briefly introduce this webinar. What we're looking at, we know the title is, so it's focusing on XR for government and military. And this is kind of part of a series that we're doing for the next big thing, which Bob Pineapple will speak about in a second. But we're looking to cover a range of topics here today. Everything from different kinds of devices, hardware advances that are coming, getting them in your network, how you use these training capabilities and solutions when you have people all over the world in distributed fashion, how people can collaborate using these technologies, and then all the acquisition issues, of course, to bring these things into your organization. So you have all, and I say this all to our attendees right now, which I see is climbing, we're at 177. You did a wonderful job of submitting lots of questions. I got 10 pages of questions yesterday before the webinar even began. I've never seen anything like that. So we're going to do and you can, of course, submit questions as the webinar goes on. We will do our best to get to as many as we can. We're going to give our speakers an opportunity to speak for a few minutes about their views on this topic. And then we're going to try and have as much time as we can, about 30 minutes or so, for Q&A. So I would like to now hand it over to Bob Pineapple for a few words about the next big thing. Bob?
Hi, good morning, everybody. I'm Bob Kleinhampel from RCK Simulations and the lead of the NTSA Next Big Thing Committee. What our mission is about is accelerating the adoption of nascent and novel technologies for modeling, simulation, and training community, which have high ROI for the warfighters. But what I want to give you here today is a quick teaser about what to expect at ITSEC at this year's conference. We'll have a series of TED-style talks and fireside chats throughout the week of ITSEC. And some of the topics that we're tackling are catalysts to adoption, and specifically the barriers to overcome, as well as what makes for a successful adoption. We'll take an extensive look at artificial intelligence, human performance, and more specifically brainwave technologies, also human-machine integration, as well as government innovation labs. So these topics are fresh, and the presentations will be in digestible bites. So I hope you all can attend and be prepared to be engaged, informed employees to accelerate emerging technology adoption within your organizations. Look forward to seeing you all there at ITSEC. Thanks, Eliot. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Bob. Well, let's just jump right in, because I know we're going to have a lot of questions, so I want to make sure we have our opportunity for that, as well as getting our speakers our time now. So we are going to start with our first speaker is going to be Doug Patton, the Sims Innovation Cell Chief of the U.S. Air Force. Doug, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. So when we talk about XR and how it's being used within the DoD and specifically within the Air Force, there are a lot of different groups doing a lot of different training. So there's your maintenance, your flight, a ton of other industries that are doing it, your fire training. That's going to be an XR kind of thing that people are looking at. And the thing we have to stay away from is working in those big, heavy silos. When you look at the gaming world and when people talk about, I'm going to get a new computer, I'm going to get a new XR capable system to be able to play the latest games, they're not just working on themselves and they're working independently. What they're doing is they're going to their friends and they're talking to their co-mates on the team and everything and getting a good understanding of what technology other people are using. Most often, if someone's buying one system or one console, they're going to buy the same thing that a lot of their friends have. And that's the same kind of mindset that we really need to have when it comes to XR, is understanding those requirements, but then also getting a good grasp on what everyone else is using and how we can collectively work together. So this common environment for simulation and training really requires us to have good conversations. So events like this, ITSEC is going to be a huge one for us, where we're going to be able to go talk to all the vendors that are out there. And this isn't a matter of we're going to pick one or the other, we like this one over the other one. Figuring out how we can leverage all current technologies that are out there and bring that into the DoD workspace so that we're able to benefit from all the fantastic technology. We know that industry needs requirements from us. That's something that we're sitting down and establishing. But really what's happening is we're learning while we're doing. The requirements that we might have established 2 years ago have been blown out of the water by the capabilities of the technology today. So we have to be very rapid on how we identify those requirements and also how we start to get that technology. These kinds of conversations are exactly what we need to start to advance XR training within the DoD, within the Air Force, within SIMS. Every one of those levels has to have the big conversations so that we know what is and isn't out there. And that's that collaborative approach. So my office, what we do is just collaboration with every single vendor that's out there to understand how it can help support and supply the SIMS devices that are out there, the training that's out there, and get a good collaboration going. And that's the whole point. So you'll hear me push for a lot more conversations and a lot more understanding, working with the different vendors that are out there, working with the folks from HTC and the folks from Mass Virtual to understand what's the art of the possible, how do we leverage it, and what are the current capabilities. Now, I know that security is a huge part of it, and that's something we've been actively running down. Understanding ATOs, that's another huge part of it, and that's how we're running down. And technology is moving so much faster than we're able to, which is fantastic, but it's in these collaborations and conversations that we're really able to start to identify where we need to go next. There are a lot of people that'll say, you know, this is the next technology, that's the next technology. And I caution folks to think that XR is going to change everything, when in reality, XR is going to make whatever we have right now improve where it's applicable. It's not going to reinvent the absolute wheel, but it's going to make things a lot better. Remember when you used to have to rotary dial a phone and it was terrible, and then you had a home phone and you couldn't walk out of the kitchen with it? It's that same idea. You're not actually getting a brand new way of communicating. You're actually just improving what you currently have. So communicating with the vendors, getting good understanding of what's out there, that's really the bread and butter of what we're doing. When you think about XR, don't necessarily think about how it's able to be used to solve problems that we currently have. Start to think about how it might be able to leverage other things. We have training devices in this cell right now that are for fire extinguisher training, for weapons loading trainers. There's a whole host of different ways that we can approach XR and start to leverage it in our current environments. These collaborations, that's where we get it. So I encourage anyone to reach out to me if it's something that you want to collaborate with the Air Force and Simulators Division on. Continue to attend these, continue to understand how technology, specifically XR, can work and how you're able to leverage it in your technology. And let's just keep these conversations going. That's the only way that people know about the next video game consoles, the next headsets and controllers, is that communication. So this kind of stuff, it's an absolute need for us to really get anywhere. I know I'm probably going to have a ton of questions. There's a lot that are being figured out and discovered as we go. Like I said, we're kind of building the plane as we're flying it. But it's a good time to keep having those conversations, keep the chats going and the questions going so that we can make sure everyone knows where we are. We are working on a larger guideline that's going to help everyone understand how you get into XR. I make the joke sometimes that when you talk about AR, VR, MR, XR, and ER, those last three are pretty much the same, but do people know that? And getting in and defining what that is and really talking honestly about XR headsets. A lot of folks say, I don't want to wear a headset because it makes me sick. There's been huge advancements when it comes to that. Your human performance aspects, how long you can wear them, just getting a good understanding of the latest technology, how it can be applied, and then applying it sensibly rather than trying to force the issue is something that's going to get us where we really need to be. So like I said, definitely with everyone else that's speaking today, with Dave and Dan especially, these are the guys that we have to communicate with regularly to make sure that we know what's out there, what's possible, and how do we adapt it to our current needs to help support the warfighter. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Doug. So a quick note as I'm watching the chat here, we're just shy of 200 people. There might be a few folks that are having some audio and video issues. We are on the internet. We all know that kind of happens. If you didn't catch it, this is being recorded and will be available to everybody. So if you're having trouble viewing it live, you will have an opportunity to watch it in recorded fashion in about a day or so is when it'll come out. So now I want to pass over to our second speaker, Dave Dwyer, Chief Operating Officer for Mass Virtual. Dave?
Hey, thanks, Eliot. Appreciate it. I remissed my introduction. Some of you guys probably got the invite yesterday with the email, and it had John Brooks' name on there. Well, for those of you who aren't aware, we're based in Orlando. And we have this little thing called Tropical Storm Helene coming our way. So he was up in the Panhandle where that thing's looking to strike. And so he is making haste to get his way out of the way. So you guys have me today. So with that being said, I'll give you guys a little bit of intro on who Mass Virtual is. So we're an XR human performance company, and we specialize in building experiences to all the different types of XR devices and mediums. And we're a leading content provider in the defense space. And as that, touched on security, Doug did a little bit there. Security always comes at the forefront of our designs for either our platform and our content. And extremely excited today to be, look at what the community involvement is. We've got government and industry on the same call here to figure out what the pathway is forward so that we can, continue to prove the right solution that meets our requirements and really provide at the point of need at the time of need, right, for a multitude of scenarios. From our perspective, we're highly focused on building the right experience, so that we get that desired user outcome when it's tied to proficiency. The solutions that we have to warrant you're going to put that headset on. It's got to warrant what the outcome is on the backside of it. So we're extremely focused on that and tying all the requirements, whether that be security, learning, actual execution, operational environment, a training environment, whatever it happens to be. We're extremely focused on that. Because the bottom line, at the end of the day, from our perspective, if what you're doing and what we're providing out there, whether it's an XR solution, whether it's a desktop training solution, whether it's an operational app, doesn't really matter if it's not getting a human performance impact when it goes into the field. And, with that being said, we can pull all the data we want. We can say the likes, the dislikes, all that kind of stuff. But if you're not seeing that, we're going to have a hard time accelerating adoption as we move forward within the environment and propagating it throughout the enterprise. So with that, Eliot, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Thank you, Dave. And let's go to our third speaker. So Dan O'Brien, President of the Americas, HTC VIVE. Dan. We got your audio again, Dan. He's so good about muting. Look at that. That is a note for everybody attending webinars. Mute your mic when you're not speaking. You're right. An example there.
So, okay. But just kind of going through, what is HTC as a company? Why do we exist? I always like to lead with that, in that our company has a logo. It is a triangle. It actually stands for something. It stands for technology, imagination, and humanity. So everything that we're doing, everything that we develop, whether it's hardware, a wearable, a headset, 5G connectivity, or platform services to deliver content or content itself, everything that we do is driven from the brand promise and the brand ethos. So we really take the latest and greatest technology, we put it together in ways that not many other people can ever really come up with. And we deliver solutions that improve humanity. So much of what we've done in the last several years has been very focused on DoD, the the federal space, because we know that we can make a huge impact with human performance, with just overall preparedness for training and simulation. That's overwhelming the highest use case for a lot of our technology. I mean, sure, there's the consumer side of it, there's the consumer angles of it, but in many ways that's not really benefiting humanity. It's more of an entertainment piece, which is great, and it helps drive the industry forward. But why we actually developed our company, why we actually developed these products and solutions, was to improve humanity. And so we do think that we can bring a great deal of benefit. So when we look at just kind of like proof points of saying, does it really work? I don't, because there's always going to be naysayers. Believe me, I made smartphones before they were called smartphones, and I had people tell me I'll never put my calendar or my photos on a phone. And I looked at them and I said, you most certainly are, and not only you're going to do it, everyone else is too. So I can say with a lot of confidence, delivering, this type of technology to mass volumes of users, this is going to be a tool. And I think, it's not going to be a replacement, but it's going to be a tool that really benefits us. Because when we look at just training alone, 81% of respondents, agreed that XR training, increased their confidence. They've seen improved education. They've seen simulations increase, in real crisis environments. So when you're training someone to, run towards fire, I think we mentioned, firefighter training, but there's the biological, physiological response in high crisis, high stress environments where your biology is set to either fight, freeze, or run, right, or flee. And in so many ways, what we're training people to do is to go towards the crisis, go towards the fire, and then handle it with calm, and handle it with really good decision making. And we've already seen where 75% of respondents to our surveys are planning to, introduce XR training. But, it comes down to, for this environment, you have to have training, you have to have products that meet security requirements. Our headsets are completely encrypted so that they can operate inside of the DoD environment, inside of secure environments. There is no social network behind our hardware or our technology or our software. So data, privacy, security, these things are paramount to not only the solutions we bring to our customers, but for our brand and meeting our brand promise, because that doesn't fall within the guidelines of what we do there. So we're constantly looking at how do we improve the hardware, whether it's XR or VR or mixed reality or getting into AR technology. We're constantly looking at this industry and this vertical of operations and saying, how do we best serve this vertical and these customers with the proper solutions that will assist them in their jobs. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Dan. Okay, so look, our speakers, wow, they finished with the 10:08. Well, I'm in Central Time Zone, so 11:18 for you Eastern folks. So we've got a good amount of time for Q&A. So reminder, go into the Q&A function in your browser and start submitting questions if you'd like to ask our panelists any questions. We have a bunch, as I said, that were submitted before the webinar. So I'm going to pull one of those and we'll start there. And I think I'm going to start, and as we go to the questions here, I'll say to the panelists, sometimes I may have all of you answer, depending on what the question is. Sometimes we may just, if it's directed at one person, but if anybody else wants to chime in, just come off mute when someone's done talking and feel free, okay? But this one, I think, is applicable to everybody. I'm going to put Dan on the spot, let him start. So do you feel the hardware for XR is meeting the demands of the needs for the collaborative technology and for the needs of training simulations in general?
Well, I think that we're making a lot of really great progress. Okay, we have gone from the days of being connected to a PC VR headset tethered with external base stations and tracking to very high fidelity proof point, training simulations, but very siloed, meaning like one user, one experience, and going in and training on a procedure, whether it was maintenance on aircraft or training on flight simulators and things of that nature. And I think Dave Dwyer and Mass Virtual Team probably have a lot of learnings on that, but we have progressed massively towards now you can do collaborative training. You can have multiple people as well as the trainer from multiple different locations globally in a training session at the same time now. So the platforms have matured, the security has matured. So now you can actually do multi-user training, multi-team member training. So if you have multiple members in the same space, you can have multiple people in Europe, multiple people in Asia, multiple people somewhere in the US, and all training in that environment together. So yes, we are making great progress. The headsets are getting lighter, more powerful. The fidelity is getting easier. We just launched a new headset that does something so simple as it's called Auto IPD. It adjusts the lenses based on the user's eye position so that you have the best clarity. Like none of that existed before. You had to do all this stuff manually. And trust me, I wore glasses since I was 16 years old. I didn't know my IPD. So we're just making incremental changes, and that will never ever stop. But yeah, I think we're at a point now where we can really bring a lot of users in, and we can train, we can do simulation at a very scaled level, and the durability of the hardware is there, the security is there. So I think, yes, we've made a ton of progress, but we're going to keep pushing it forward.
All right. I'm going to pass over to Dave now. We're going to go to our other industry vendor, and then we're going to let Doug wrap it up from the government point of view. Dave, take it away.
Yeah, so I think I'd echo with Dan. I mean, the results kind of speak for themselves, right, with what we're doing. I mean, just in our couple of instances, we've got, there's one instance, we've got 31,000 users going through our stuff in a year. It started with one training application, and it's expanded to over 600 different training solutions that we've got in a 2.5-year span. So, from that standpoint, the adoption rate, obviously it's doing something, but it wouldn't be adopted that widely if the hardware wasn't coming along and if the content wasn't coming along to support that. So I think the results, that's how we're measured, right? If the results are showing that it's working, it's working. Can it be better? Always can be better. There's always the next great thing. But I think the advancements at least from the hardware perspective, I think it's moving faster than old Moore's Law, right? Which was every 18 months you'd see a double. It seems to be moving pretty damn quick, which presents its own challenges for keeping ahead when we talk about the wickets that we have to go through to get stuff approved and all that. But overall, I think what we're seeing from our side, not only is the hardware advancing, but the results that we're getting from that, it's faster throughput on the training courses. It's, better first time right when they go out and put hands on whatever they're working on. Things of that are proving that it is going in the right direction. And hey, the more we can advance it, the quicker we can take it, I think the better it'll be. So I'll leave it at that.
All right, Doug, what are your thoughts?
So I'm going to give the nerdy answer. When if you're playing an online shooter, I don't want it to be in 4K. I don't want it to be in 8K. I want good frames. I want good resolution, and I want good response from the actual system itself. And what happens in the industry is the industry will say, well, we can get an 8K headset. We can get a 4K headset. We can get, the limit is way up there of what you can get. And you don't actually necessarily need that for a lot of the training that we're doing. Now, what is that level? That's still something that we as the Air Force still have to figure out, is what is that actual level of, hey, this is real enough to be able to do flying. It's still going to be better than what we currently have. But a lot of times they push that line far beyond where we need it. So we say, yeah, the headset that came out this year is fantastic. My requirements actually fit the headset from 2 or 3 years ago. Industry knows that. And we tell industry all the time, hey, because of the security requirements and because of what we actually need for the actual training, you don't have to make the latest and greatest headset. We can pull out a lot of the stuff. We don't need the noise canceling. We don't need the OLED screens if the training doesn't require it. So it's a balancing act, and it's a lot of communication and saying, even though the latest and greatest, the stuff you see at CES is fantastic, that doesn't actually mean it's what we need in the training world. But that also requires us to tell you guys what you need from that training world and what is actually required. And it's usually not 8K with 256 refresh or anything. Usually it's a stable system that's secured where we can understand it. It has good SCRM. And so it's a lot simpler than what's currently out there. But it has to be communicated. It's a balancing act.
All right. Well, I like your last comment because that's going to segue right into the next question that we had submitted. So why don't we know, Doug, we'll let you continue on this little riff, and then we'll take it off. So the question is, given the sensitive nature of government and military operations, what specific security measures or protocols should be prioritized when implementing XR technologies to ensure compliance with ATO requirements and safeguard against potential vulnerabilities?
So this, I'm going to beat up on some of our cybersecurity people, is that the office said that they wanted mixed reality. And they said, absolutely, we want mixed reality. But the headset can't have any cameras. Okay. So the first part is actually just understanding what you do and don't need, and what is part of the training. Cybersecurity is a huge thing. You know, you have your headsets. Is your headset an operating system? Is your headset a monitor, a display device? That has to be assessed. Does your headset have flashable media? Like there's so many things that have to be assessed. And then what is it that you're putting onto the headset itself? How are you getting that information onto the headset? How is it being sent back? What's happening at the end of the day? We still have a lot of groups that are putting headsets in Faraday cages at the end of each night because it's just such an unknown. We don't know what we are supposed to do, so we're going to throw this into this box. So you'll see a lot of secure headsets that are being developed, and those are fantastic, and they do what we need them to do. But also we need to start to look at, if I want to be at that next level of technology, if I want a wireless headset where I can download training and be able to use it in the dorms, be able to use it in the schoolhouse, vice versa, what do we need to do from a cybersecurity aspect to really understand what it is? We can tear down the headset and we can look at where the chipsets are. But instead of saying, oh, we can't use these because these are from contested areas, understand how to do your chip assessments better, understand how to do your SCRM and your CERT better, and just get better understanding of what the next level of technology is. And how do we actually work within those grounds? We have a fantastic cybersecurity group. And the caveat I always put is that every single base has their own cybersecurity groups. I let them determine what is safe for them. We just convey that to them. So you're likely to never see a policy, at least from simulators, that says this is the cybersecurity requirement for everyone across the board, because it's independent on each building and each base on what they feel is important. So again, it's more of that communication and understanding. We have to learn what the headsets can and can't do, what they're doing while they're being operated, and then how do we adapt to what's currently out there. And it's just being more agile when it comes to our threat assessment and our cybersecurity.
So Dan and Dave, I imagine you have some thoughts on what security protocols need to be prioritized.
Sure.
Dan, how about you?
Sure. For starters, just talk about our company a little bit. Products that haven't even had an ounce of architecture or design or physical prototyping done yet go through a security review in our company. So for vulnerability, so security is part of like day 1 or day minus 90, you know, where you don't physically even have a product yet, you have an idea, and you do security reviews. Throughout the development process, the product goes through security reviews. Our cameras are encrypted. It's why our headset is the only headset on the International Space Station. Okay, it is used for mental health, you know, distraction therapy, you know, for the astronauts that are up there for extended missions in time. Amazingly, they have to use experiences to come back down to Earth to find better mental health. However, I digress. But our product actually met not only the security criteria, it met the safety criteria to be in that environment. Okay, and so there's a lot we do internally to block developers, platforms from being able to access the cameras, being able to access any of the information on the headset. In most cases, it has to be used in a highly high security environment. There are ways that we can actually work with you to make the product even more secure. But we've also developed older products like the VIVE Pro Secure, okay, that actually can go into highly secure environments. So we have a history of working with the DoD environment from a hardware perspective. But it also comes down to that security review. This is something we take exponentially seriously. It's also why we've been able to get into the banking industry, because we met so many of the security criteria for DoD and federal that banking actually became interested in our products. So I think security is critical. It has to be built in from day 1 from a design ethos, and it can't be shoehorned in later. That product is Swiss cheese if you try to add security to it later. I think that's kind of it from our side. I think the just in general, we have several products that have met the ATO criteria through our vendors and partners. And we're really proud of those partnerships and the products that have gone through there. That is something that we will continue to strive for in all of our product portfolio to serve the federal space.
All right, Dave, any thoughts?
Yeah, just a few. So obviously, Dan and Doug talked a lot about the hardware piece of it. When we come to the content development side of the house, I think every customer across the different DoD branches, they seem to have a different set of criteria that you have to meet, right? A lot of it's similar, but they all have their own little spin on it, right? And so whether we're talking about PII considerations, things of that nature, when it comes to the actual content capture of things, it's a whole different set of wickets that accompany the hardware, and as you tie to it, so it doesn't just end with just getting the hardware across the line, right? It's a whole thought process from start to finish. As Dan said, it's got to start from day minus 90 or left of the beginning of the project to make sure that you got everything set where it needs to be set, and that you're adhering to the specification, because he's 100% correct. If you try and shoehorn this stuff after the fact, you're never going to catch it all, and you'll be completely sitting out there alone. So, from that standpoint, I think, it's from a start to end process, including hardware, software as a total solution. You have to be thinking about it. So.
All right. Let's because we are covering a really wide range of topics here. Let's jump over to something a lot of us do, usability, UX type stuff. We had a question submitted just now, but that also kind of melds very nicely with a question that was submitted ahead of time. So a lot of our folks work with end users quite often. And the biggest barrier that many of them find is user experience. The users often have difficulties getting logged into the systems, updating them, keeping them on Wi-Fi, getting them where they need to be within the system to use it. If you have light boxes or tracked areas, what can we do to simplify this as much as possible? Basically, what's a good way to introduce this at a beginner level and get these technologies in from a user experience point of view? How about Dave? How about you start this one off?
Yeah, sure. So, we could talk. I'll let Dan talk to the hardware usability side of the house. I'll talk to the actual software experience about the logging in and whatnot. So, from the beginning of what we design and how we design it, right? It's a human-centered and user design approach from the beginning. Our customers are engaged probably throughout 90% of our development process and how it needs to operate. And when it goes to field, right, when we're turning the product over, it's a short train the trainer thing that needs to happen. We're deploying the solution, and they're off on their way. And you got to think of it like the Apple phone. Are you constantly calling the Genius desk or whatever it is, to use your phone once you get it? No, it needs to be usable. It needs to be user friendly. So that needs to be baked in from, just like the security does from the beginning. The user experience needs to be thought out from the start. It can't be an afterthought. You can't be going down developing whatever the product is and the interface that you have, and then going, oh, wait a second, how's the user going to interact with this, and how is it going to, how's it going to function when it gets into the real world? And probably the last thing you want is every time that you have a fielded product, you don't need to have a contractor sitting over the shoulder or someone from our team or from whoever's team sitting over the shoulder teaching them how to run it. So it's got to be a standalone product that's designed with the user and the target user audience in mind. So that comes from, you've got the ISDs up front, right, that do the instructional design. If it's a training application, you've got the software or UX people doing, if it's a operational application. All that needs to be, from a application perspective and running of the content, needs to be thought of up front with your user involved, customer in the loop development, in order to field it. So, I'll let Dan talk about setting. I know we've come a long way with how we used to have to do calibrate rooms and all that stuff, and sitting down now, it's a click of a button. So, those types of advancements help reduce the barriers. So.
All right, Dan, you're all teed up.
Thanks, Dave. Usability is critical, right? Especially for new users. And while I've been doing this since 2014, and even Dave and Matt's virtual team have been doing this, very long time as well, probably around the same time. And we've increased that usability dramatically. But we think about ergonomic weight. We think about the weight distribution so that it's not heavy on your face, and you can be in the sessions for long periods of time, and so that you can take things like gaskets off and they can be hygienically cleaned very quickly and easily. We design things like replaceable batteries so that the headsets can run for 24 hours a day. I mean, nobody does that, but we do have training rooms and training simulations that they're running through, 50 to 100 people an hour, and we design all the software so that you can actually have classrooms that don't have that massive downtime and they can turn things over very quickly. So we've thought about, from an ergonomic standpoint, everything from the visuals of the lenses actually adjusting on their own for the end user so that they get the best clarity and visual performance and visual clarity, to all the way down to the weight and the heat distribution. I mean, we put a fan in our headset just to remove heat from the goggles so that you have a more comfortable experience. So we've thought about all those things. We're also working on 5G connectivity, not to go too far down another path, but how do you then turn the headsets into scale that can be brought out to different locations, and how do you have that connectivity and 15 plus, maybe 30 headsets at a time, being used in different remote locations. We've thought about all those things. We've thought about how we make it very easy, for say one trainer to work with 30 to 100 plus users an hour. And so yeah, we have thought about those problems. We've thought about those use cases, the software and how to do it, how to activate those headsets and put them into collaboration sessions very quickly and easily. So yeah, there's software to do all that. The hardware has been improved drastically. The hardware is all going to get lighter. It's all going to get easier over time as we work towards really, really usable AR types of goggles and wearables. But right now we're doing things more like in the mixed reality space of it. And now when you put on a headset too, you can see the entire room and walk around the room and interact with your watch, interact with your phone, interact with the other people in the room. So you're not necessarily putting on a pair of goggles and just disappearing into this black virtual environment. You actually put on a headset now and you are in your real environment, and then you can go to that occluded virtual environment. So a lot of improvements there.
Doug, I know you have opinions on user experience.
I also work with a bunch of end users. No, so the real risk with a lot of technologies is people are going to go out and they're going to buy headsets, and they're going to bring in their headsets into the trainings and the schoolhouses and everything, and they're going to start to use them. And if there isn't a handoff, there isn't a, hey, let me sit down and show you how it works. A lot of times, unless they have that one nerdy guy that's like, I know how this stuff works, they might not adapt it at all. And they might be wanting to show it off and say, hey, this is a cool technology. If it doesn't work that first time, it's a huge impact on how successful it can be across the board. So in my lab, we have a bunch of headsets that we demo regularly, and we have to go through and learn and understand how those work and how they can be effective. And that simplification, even for people like us, I don't necessarily know the nuances. What computers do you need to get the headsets? Well, a lot of folks will go out and they'll buy the latest headset. Their computer won't run it. So then they say, well, then I can't do XR. It's a gimmick. I've had so many people that'll tell me that XR is the next Nintendo. Oh, you're just trying to buy that next Nintendo. You're just trying to buy the Nintendo 2 or whatever. And a lot of that comes from, there isn't a handoff that comes from the industry to help us understand, the government understand how to start to leverage that. And you'll see us push for a lot more of that too, of how do I start to use headsets? How do I get it in a system? What do I need to plug in? Again, it's more of that communication, because otherwise, if it's, you go out and you buy 100 wireless headsets and you hook them up and they don't work, you go, oh, then XR doesn't work. It's doomed. And then you have a whole chunk of people that are leaning away from it. So I always encourage industry to come out and be hands-on with us so that we understand what it is. And you go like, hey, your headset's on backwards. Oh, now it works perfectly. So just having those kinds of conversations with us is always helpful, especially with the end users, because a lot of them, they just don't know the technology.
All right, we just had a really good question come in. I was all teed up with something else, and I saw this one. It's kind of a user experience, so I want to keep it with this. So this is again for any of you or all of you. Someone typed, how can real-time physiological measurements, so our heart rate, eye tracking, etc., be integrated into XR headsets to enhance user experience? Monitoring and personalized feedback, particularly in applications such as Air Force pilots, virtual training. Do your systems allow for that kind of integration? What are the challenges of making this happen? So we'll go to Dan from a hardware part of where you start there. I think you're muted, sir.
There you go. I'm gonna get it by the last question. So yeah, so we've incorporated a lot of that technology into older like PC versions where we incorporate it as an accessory. The latest headset that we just launched is the VIVE Focus Vision. That actually has native eye tracking built into it, so it has the two cameras as well as the LED sensors. We also don't track any biometric data. We don't pull any of that data back. So from a security standpoint, that's your data or the end user's data or the trainer's data, right? Is trying to evaluate how a trainee is actually performing and whether or not they want to, increase the stress load or the performance load. There's a lot you can do there. We're actually seeing the AI technology kind of take over where we can actually measure from your pupils, stress load on the actual trainee. So they don't necessarily have to have an oxygen meter or heart rate meter in a separate place. Although nice to have those kind of accurate data inputs. I think you can do some simple connections in the future around, say like watch technology or things of that nature to grab heart rates and things of that. But I think the retina and the eye technology is grabbing a lot of the overall stress load and performance, for the trainees. So that's actually at the early days of like what you can actually capture from there. But like the VA and the hospital and the healthcare areas are actually specifically using that metric now to measure cognitive load on patients that are doing therapeutics. So there's a lot we can do with eye tracking. It's built into the headset now. It's there. It's ready for you to use. You can access all the data points from it. Nobody's blocking it. There's no firewall that you have to pay an extra fee for this or that, like other headsets, to access your own data. That's your data. You use it, making people better. When it comes to other inputs like facial tracking, you can add that on to any of our headsets. So we have additional add-ons for facial trackers, but you're really at that point grabbing like your cheeks, your lips, your jawline, your teeth, your tongue. So if you want very accurate avatar interactions or something of that nature, you can kind of track the muscular areas of the face as well. So those are kind of the key like biometric areas that we've allowed for right now. I think there'll be more in the future, but I think eye tracking is here to stay because it also allows you to do foveated rendering on content. So you can increase the brightness and the pixel density in the display when we're only tracking and lighting up on the panel exactly what your retina is looking at. So we don't light up the rest of the panel. The very first VIVE headset, we had no idea what you were looking at. So we had to render an entire cell phone panel at 90 frames per second at full brightness because we didn't know what you were looking at besides like maybe some early like gaze, game engine gaze control technology. So we've made a lot of improvements there. Now we can actually just render exactly what you're looking at, and we can make it as bright and clear as possible. And it also allows for some accessibility functionality that we haven't yet really gone down. But now you're going to start opening up accessibility functionality for people that are limited in their, whether it's their physical therapy or in commands or selections. You're going to be able to use your eyes for a lot of functionality inside of these VR experiences.
All right, Dave, any thoughts on, incorporating these physiological measures?
I think, from what we've seen just in the initial implementations over the last 3 years from putting, making the transition in, I'm just going to talk about a training environment, right? Going from whether it's computer-based training just to a VR type environment. We have not been in a shortage of data to analyze for what it is. Part of our grading criteria on some of the training tasks that we do is, hey, did you look at this particular bolt nut, whatever it happens to be, right? And oh yeah, I looked at it. Well, you can go back and replay and go, you didn't check it off, you didn't do the checklist right, and all that stuff. And so it's really getting to the point, it's kind of back in the old IT days. We have all this data now. It's talking about what are the valid points to pull out of it that you can actually use to trigger whether it's what the impact is on the human performance, or is it performing better? But there's definitely not a shortage of data when it comes to analyzing what we've got in the virtual world, because you're in a 3D world now. There's so much, the realm of possibilities are endless for it. There's doctors that are smarter than me processing the data now and figuring out what the data points are that we need to pull out of it. But it is totally doable. It's just getting to the points of we have so much sorting through it, using the AI to help us sort through it. and really figuring out where we fine tune it for the right application.
All right, Doug, what are your thoughts? I mean, working with the end users.
I mean, eye tracking 110%. When you talk about it, IFR flying, done. So if you have a pilot that's flying in a sim and they need to be watching their airspeed and they crash and they are not watching their airspeed, you can go back and you can check it. It's the same thing if you're leveraging remote sim instruction on an XR headset and you're having someone that's learning how to fly. They say, hey, make sure you're looking at your airspeed. They're looking at their airspeed, and the instructor can verify that. And they can look and say, yep, they were looking at where they're supposed to. Eye tracking probably will become a requirement for flight training when it comes to XR, just because it is such an easy to use and necessary thing to be able to really understand, are people actually paying attention to where they should be? It's such a good training metric. You talk about hotspot training, and that 100% is eye tracking. The other stuff is going to be difficult from a security aspect. The eye tracking alone still kind of creeps some people out, but once they see the training benefits from it, they go, oh yeah, this one's an absolute must. So that one's definitely going to stick around for the time being.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll just throw a comment in being a researcher in this area. The other physiological measures also have the challenge that we don't have sensors that can do them that quickly right now. So even if you grab heart rate and stuff, there's a delay, and then you got to try and match it up and figure out what event was happening when maybe their heart rate went up a little bit or something. So, eye tracking, the sensors are pretty quick right now. All right, let's shift over to security again. We have a really nice question that came in, and again, it melds pretty nicely with one that came in early. So not only cybersecurity, but from a Trade Agreements Act or a TAA designated country point of view, finding headsets that aren't made in countries such as China or other countries on the banned list. Is there a group that has gone through this and figured out what we can and can't use, so we don't have to figure it all out ourselves? What are the challenges in obtaining an ATO, basically? So Doug, I'm going to start with you, being the government person.
Yeah, so as far as the group that's going through the headsets, that's actually my office. There's a couple of groups that are going through the headsets and really looking at your TAA and your SCRM to really understand where these headsets are coming from. And we have a lot of vendors that'll say, oh, well, this headset's assembled in Finland. Okay, so from what parts and from where? And so looking at the supply chain and looking at the TAA and looking at where these headsets really are, and then creating a repository of all of those headsets that we know of. We've started with 6 so far. There were another 5 that were already documented, and we're going through them. The challenge is getting through all the ones that we know pretty well and identifying those, and then tracking the rest of them. So if you're on the government side and you're interested in the findings for those headsets and the documentation, reach out to me. And I can run you through what all we're looking at and for what. But it's going to be one of those things we're going to have to keep assessing. And getting the information from the vendors is a good start. What we're doing on our side is a third-party investigation as well, just so we can understand both your TA requirements and your SCRM requirements, and even at a cert level, just understanding what all it is. So it's happening. It's our office. There are a lot of headsets out there that people are still using, and there are a lot of headsets that we have to go through and assess. And then when we get 10 done, there are 10 more headsets that have been created. So it's a process, but it's going. We're getting there, so it's good.
Dave, what are you seeing in this space? In terms of being a vendor trying to put these systems together and having to kind of sometimes be the person in the middle between the hardware, the software, and the sponsor.
No, I mean, TAA compliance always comes up, but typically when we get something fielded, everybody will follow whoever the first one to get it through the gate is, right? So once you have adoption, I think it just takes off from there. But everybody kind of follows suit. As we've branched across multiple services within the DoD, some are, Army's wanting to leverage Air Force wanting to leverage, it kind of, everybody wants to piggyback off of the work that everybody else has done. We're just kind of sitting there working through the requirements, working with partners like HTC, to make sure that we can get it to yes. I mean, that's our ultimate goal as a content provider, is to get them to yes and make sure that we're fielding a solution that works for their use case. So, as far as all the check boxes and all that stuff, it's a fun game. It's a fun game to play, but we get there.
And Dan, you mentioned, HTC obviously being encrypted and everything, but can you speak about the process or what it took to go through getting your headsets, to that level of security?
Well, I mean, we have the advantage of being, a country of origin, Taiwan, right, which is a TAA compliant country of origin. We also own our own manufacturing. So we manufacture every headset ourselves, controllers. Sure, we source, some components, but most of our components, I would say, are um, sourced from Taiwan as well. We're very big on very pro Taiwan, and our CEO chairperson is very pro Taiwan and trying to make sure that she creates partnerships inside of the country. I think that's a happy coincidence in some ways, but it's also part of our ethos of what we're trying to do as a company. So a lot of natural fit there to just fit into this space. In terms of the security, though, we do work with the mass virtuals of the world, and we do work with software providers on that compliance testing. Anybody that does reach out to us to then take that headset through, so like the VIVE Pro Secure was the first headset to go through that process. And that was a very much a learning process for us, where we were just responding to all the questions and the questionnaires, and helping that vendor actually take the headset through the approval process. So that's how we've done it in the past. We haven't done it first party ourselves, but we do it with our partners. And then we promote that as much as possible with our partner that actually accomplishes that TAA. The nice part is I think because we don't do a lot of the things that make people very concerned, right? We don't pull back a lot of the data that the user is using it for. We don't track the information from the cameras, that are being used for the tracking, right? Tracking that environment. So we don't grab that data. We don't grab a lot of this information that I think makes it very alarming for people. So we tend to get through a lot of the security reviews, relatively less painful, as I would say it. There's always pain in the process, but we do meet a lot of that criteria to get through. And if there's, I just encourage people to call if there's things that they need from us in order to meet the certain certifications. Definitely reach out. But we will always keep our eyes on the privacy.
All right, so we have a question. I really like this question, so I'm going to ask this. All right, this is one of these bigger picture questions. I'll get ready. What is the biggest struggle using XR in this space? Slow adoption rates, lack of budget, users not technically savvy enough, not enough realism for immersion. So you all get to kind of complain a bit for a second. What is the biggest struggle that you're having? So why don't we start with Dave? We'll put Dave on the spot first.
Well, we're 5 days out from fiscal year end, right, for the government. So it's always budget at this time of year, right? So you always use more. But no, honestly, I think if we looked at our adoption rate over the last 2.5 years, I don't think you could go much faster than what we've done for what we've got, and how fast it's taken off. So I really think it's just a financial limitation from what we're seeing and what we're putting out there, and the feedback that we're receiving. We're kind of seeing it from both sides. We're seeing it from the defense side as well as the commercial side. And even on the commercial side, they're talking about it's 4x faster to train using XR or VR technology, right? We're seeing similar numbers with what we're seeing from what we're deploying on the defense space. So it's correlating across multiple industries from that technology perspective. And if you look at even the studies from a commercial sector, I know Dan, you mentioned like 81% in your study. There was a similar number that PwC threw out. They said 81% of the companies they surveyed have some kind of XR strategy in play, in motion somewhere along it. And that was like medium to large companies, right? So I mean, it's moving. I don't think you're gonna halt the train. Doug talked earlier about hey, we got to figure out what the right level of fidelity is, and I think this is always the being 20 plus years in the defense sector and training, it's always the conversation we have. It goes from fidelity doesn't matter to, oh wait, we need the best stuff. Oh wait, no, now it doesn't, and then we need to find it, right size it, all that stuff. And the only thing that I'll say from our perspective is that, being quite candid, is training doesn't have to suck. All right. So that's where I'll leave it from our end. So that's our philosophy moving forward with it. Right. So with that, no, I mean, I think the only obstacle we reach is budget from our end. Sure, as the red tape to go through, there is with everything that's federal, but we're pretty happy with the adoption rates we've gotten and how fast we've been growing it and continue to push it. So we don't see it slowing down, and we don't want it to slow down.
All right, who next? Doug, how about you?
A big part of it is just requirements. You'll get a bunch of different offices that'll say, yeah, I love XR. This is great. We need requirements from the MAGCOMs to be able to do work. And we know that. And that's standard DoD stuff. What the MAGCOMs need is a better understanding of what the technology is out there. So when I use the reference of it's me trying to explain to my parents why I need a Super Nintendo, that conversation and how to frame that conversation correctly to the powers that be so they understand this isn't actually just a gimmick thing. There is viable work and training that can come out of this. That conversation is the thing that needs to happen. So we have a lot of groups that are really into XR. They love it and they have the money for it and they want to go fast and everything. They pick it up. And the concern is that those adoptions are being very siloed. So communicating back up the chain and establishing a policy, an actual Air Force policy for XR that's kind of overarching, that says everything for XR across the board. That's part of what we're trying to do in the Sims division too, is create a guideline that says this is what XR is, this is how you can use it, this isn't policy, but then helps to dictate what that is. Because as soon as that policy gets drafted and that ink starts to get on paper of this is how you go do XR, it's going to move quick. So we have to know what we're getting into and make sure that we know what it is. And a lot of it is just, like I said, that communication stuff so that people understand it. Because, Mom, I don't just need a Super Nintendo because it's the latest and greatest. It's going to play my games even better. So let's have that conversation so we can actually get it up to them. There's money for it. There's a demand for it. There's proof that it absolutely works. It just has to go up the chain to senior leadership so that they understand what it is. And a lot of that comes from the vendors. The vendors are fantastic at displaying the technology so that we can understand what's out there and our leadership can understand. It's just communication to get it back up that chain so we can get moving fast.
All right, Dan, take us home. What are the biggest struggles that you're seeing?
Oh gosh, I mean, it went from the early days of like scalability. It was a very expensive PC to a very expensive headset. So a very siloed, type of environment. It was very complex. Now we're at scale with all-in-one headsets that can deploy in the hundreds of thousands at a time, to two users, right? Like we have completely changed it out. I would say, we did have early days of fidelity and things that we have solved for. Like the first headsets, you couldn't read any dials or settings in a cockpit. It was very much a game, an entertainment device in the very early days. It couldn't be really deployed. Now we're at a point of visual fidelity, accuracy, deployability, security. So I think it comes down to what we also found was a lot of people didn't know how they could use it or what value they could do. Right, so now we have all these stats about intention, performance. Dave gave great stats. Doug gave great stats on actual performance. Human performance improvements. We see doctors making 6 times fewer errors in an operating room. I want that doctor, right? But we also see training. It comes down to like training, as Dave said, shouldn't suck, but it also comes down to sets and reps. If you want to get really fit, you got to do sets and reps, right? It's how many sets and reps can you get through? And here you can do it basically, limitless in terms of volume of training and, making mistakes, as part of that training process. You now have AI tools that will help you with that process. In terms of like scalability to actually bring value to training, we have greatly improved it. So I think, getting through training 400% faster, retention rates are at 75%. If we were just to do training off of a presentation, right, a typical presenter presentation, retention's 5%, right? Retention in immersive training is 75%. Training in reading is 15%. But then you look at like, what is the drop off after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? Training and reading or presentations, like the drop off is like almost, it's ridiculous. Immersive training, the drop off actually, it doesn't happen. It goes down very small. It's a very small percentage. So because you're using what we call kinesthetic learning, right? So you're learning with your hands, your eyes, your ears, your different senses. So the training is just much more vivid and valid and more effective. So overall, we had to prove that out and get a lot of the white papers. We had to get a lot of clearance to get white papers. I'm still working with people in, the rocket space where they've reduced change management of design change management, making engineering design changes. They've reduced the time to change approvals by 100 hours. So that comes down to collaboration, people being in different locations and being able to actually collaborate and work together. So really, really effective tool to reduce your times, increase efficiencies, improve performance. But all that took time to actually get that data so that now it can be scaled. And so I think we're just removing those hurdles, and I think that's where we are right now as an inflection point. So I'm really excited for what's going to happen over the next couple of years.
Well, thank you. We are right at noon Eastern. That was perfect, I think. So first off, I really want to thank our panelists. So Doug, Dave, and Dan will give you a little virtual and, the little hand clap emojis and all our emoticons, all that kind of stuff. Really great discussion. I know for some of you who weren't able to get to all your questions, I apologize for that. I actually went and counted up. We had 250 questions submitted, either prior to or during the webinar. So we did our best to kind of grab areas from security, technology adoption, capability, security, kind of cover everything. Our panelists were gracious enough to put their contact information in the chat. You can find all of them in there. So please go through and grab those and feel free to bombard them with their questions. They gave you their email, so that's fair game. Go for it. But gentlemen, thank you so much. Looking forward. Hopefully we'll see y'all at ITSEC in a few months here, and we continue this discussion on extended reality. Thank you, everybody.